1,000 prisoners. Witnesses report mutilated bodies in the streets. Government troops and police are flinging their weapons. CNN senior international correspondent Arwa Damon has spent years covering the conflict in Iraq. She's joining us now from London. Another horrible situation, but this time our second largest city is in turmoil.
That's right, Wolf, and this is beyond a disastrous situation for the Iraqi government and for the clearly were unable to push back these militant fighters who carried out what is a very coordinated and well-planned attack.
Hours, huge swaths of Iraq's second largest city, Mosul, fell to ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, an al-Qaeda splinter group so ruthless that even the feared terrorist organization has distanced itself from them. The Iraqi military abandoned their positions.
Planes in command positions, all of them have fallen in addition to weapons caches. Also, prisons were stormed, and criminals have been set free. What happened is a catastrophe by any measure.
Residents fled on foot, the voice on this video pleading, "God help us," as people are seen walking into the barren countryside. Iraq's prime minister urged parliament to declare a state of emergency, but many blame this failing to heed warnings that ISIS was planning this brazen attack. ISIS had already taken over much of Iraq's Sunni heartland of Al-Anbar province, including the city of Fallujah, which was wrested from insurgents a decade ago in one of the deadly once declared that it had al-Qaeda in Iraq on the run. As troops were withdrawing, commanders publicly stating they believed Iraqi security forces could maintain the, quote, security gains. Government saying he and his polarizing policies caused the nation's sectarian wounds to fester and grow, which in turn allowed groups like ISIS to regain territory as Sunni anger grew 3 years after American boots left. A terrorist group considered more merciless and brutal than al-Qaeda in Iraq is gaining power and control.
Arwa, the whole situation
Wolf,
in Mosul right now is a disaster. You point out in Fallujah as well. You've spent time in Syria covering the civil war there. Is the civil war that we see unfolding in Syria right now about to explode in neighboring Iraq as well?
Well, Wolf, the two are very intertwined, especially when you have an organization like the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria that controls territory in both of those countries. And it had been quite the challenge, even when U.S. troops were in Iraq, to try to control the flow of weapons and fighters going back and forth. So the dynamics of both nations, most certainly at this stage, Wolf, are intertwined. And you also see ISIS not only regaining at this stage control over huge portions of Mosul, but also various other villages in Salahuddin province and Kirkuk province as well. All of this sending refugees into Iraq's autonomous region of Kurdistan. As one senior Iraqi politician I was just speaking to was telling me, this is a disaster of epic proportions. At this stage, no one can even begin to has any control over the situation.
I think you're right, Arwa. Jim Sciutto, Chief National Security Correspondent, is with us. I know you're speaking to U.S. officials here in Washington. They see a disaster unfolding in Iraq, and let's remember, this is a decade with tens of thousands of troops. 4,500 came home in body bags. Thousands of others were injured. The U.S. spent hundreds of billions of dollars. They look at this disaster in Iraq right now.
This administration's position that the U.S. did not gain enough by this invasion, that informed their decision to withdraw the troops. It was not worth having U.S. troops there anymore. Republicans will say that had they negotiated a status of forces agreement with the Iraqi government that would have allowed a stabilizing force of U.S. soldiers there, 10,000 perhaps. Events like this, or earlier, a couple months ago, when you had militants taking over Fallujah, for instance. Now, the Pentagon press secretary was speaking about the Iraq situation today. He said that the U.S. maintains what he described as sales relationships with the Iraqis, supplying them weapons that they would need to respond to this kind of thing, including 2 F-16s going later this year, Hellfire missiles. But as you see this unfold, Iraqis, the support it seems they need to fight this off.
Yeah, it's a real disaster unfolding in Iraq. Jim Sciutto, Arwa Damon, guys, thanks. We'll stay on top of this story. Just ahead, 5 U.S. troops fire incident in Afghanistan. We're looking into what went so